As the chairman of the Free Sweden organization, Daniel Eriksson is positioned at the vanguard of Swedish nationalism and the forefront of the defense of his nation against the great globalist assault. Collaborating with other European-descended nationalists around the world is an absolutely vital part of our mission to create a network of international nationalists. This net of allies will work together to build a better future for all white people, and Patriotic Alternative gladly stands beside Free Sweden in this noble venture. Together we will preserve and celebrate the unique cultures of Europe's great nations. We will safeguard our legacies, and we will champion our traditions so that our children's children can live in a better world. Please welcome your good friend, Dan Eriksson.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for welcoming me here today. It is both an honor and, I must admit, a little strange, because the last time I was meant to meet with your leader, Mark Collett, it didn't happen. He was supposed to attend our Summerfest in Sweden, but the Swedish government, or more probable someone pressuring the Swedish authorities, decided he was too dangerous. They stopped him at the border and refused him entry. Now think about that for a moment. In Sweden, criminals cross borders every day. Gang leaders from Middle East or Africa walk in without papers, and the state bends over backwards to accommodate them. But when an Englishman with a microphone and a message for his people tries to come, suddenly the Swedish authorities discover their courage. This is what the American thinker Sam Francis once described as anarcho-tyranny. Anarchy for the lawless, tyranny for the law-abiding. The state is too weak to protect its citizens from real criminals, but somehow always strong enough to silence patriots. And so Mark was kept out of Sweden. But here in Britain, he can stand with you today, and apparently, I was allowed entry into your beautiful country. I cannot decide whether that makes Sweden worse than Britain or Britain worse than Sweden. Perhaps we are in a contest to see which government can humiliate its own people the fastest. It would be comical if it weren't so tragic. In fact, it is comical in a dark way, because it shows how absurd the system has become. The same politicians who tell us diversity is our strength are terrified of one man with a microphone. The same governments who lecture us about democracy cannot tolerate a dissident voice crossing a border. And their panic tells us something important. They are afraid. Not afraid of violence, not afraid of so-called extremism, but afraid of the simple truth that a people, and white people in particular, has the right to exist, to protect itself, and to fight for its own future. So here we are. I am not British, as you can probably hear. My name is Daniel Eriksson, and I come from Sweden. I am chairman of an organization called Det fria Sverige, the Free Sweden, which exists to preserve our people and our culture in a country that is rapidly changing, just like yours. I recently published a new book, just last week in fact, called The Play, or Skådespelet in Swedish. It's currently available only in my native tongue, but I hope to release it in English next year. The book exposes the modern democratic system for what it truly is, a carefully staged illusion. And I run a project called Beyond Collapse, which looks at how we can build resilience, community, and real alternatives as the old order crumbles. And I'm not here to give you a lesson in Swedish politics, and I'm certainly not here to tell you how to win the next British election. In fact, I am not sure the next election matters very much at all. What I am here to say is this: if we want to survive, if we want to build something lasting for our people, we must learn how to fight in ways that makes us less vulnerable, less predictable, and less easy to shut down. We must build strength in places they cannot reach and create institutions that no law or ban can erase. That is what I want and why I want to talk to you today about three things. First, the illusion of liberal democracy, the play that keeps people distracted while their country is stolen from them. Second, the hard truth of demography, identity, and the reality that white Britons will soon be a minority in your own homeland. And third, the strategies that can make us strong again, building outside the system, creating communities that cannot be silenced, and avoiding the trap of purity spirals while our enemies unite against us. So let us begin with the great illusion, the stage play of liberal democracy. And when I call liberal democracy a stage play, I am not speaking in metaphors. I mean it quite literally. Elections are rituals, carefully choreographed to create the appearance of choice, while ensuring the outcome never changes. In Britain, I guess people vote Labour or Tory, red rosette, blue rosette, and yet immigration continues. Taxes rise, freedom shrink, your communities are transformed before your eyes. What difference did your vote make? Changing the party in power is like changing the actors on stage while the script remains the same. And I know that many Britons have placed their hopes in Reform UK, and I understand why. Compared to the others, they may seem like the least bad option. But whether they have good policies or not is not the point. The point is that too many of our people still believe that the ballot box is where power truly changes hands. They believe elections are the arena where history is decided. But elections today are not a contest of ideas. They are the grandest bread and circus of them all, bigger than football or cricket or rugby, designed to make people feel involved while ensuring nothing essential ever changes. The lights, the slogans, the televised debates, it's entertainment dressed up as politics. A stage play that distracts the people while their country is quietly taken from them. And what is the script of this play? It is the ideology of global liberalism, of anti-whiteism, of the total destruction of Western civilization. A play written not in your parliament, but in boardrooms, in universities, and in international institutions. Whether you vote left or right, the plot always ends the same way, with fewer Englishmen in England, fewer Swedes in Sweden, and fewer Europeans in Europe. Of course, the actors must play their part convincingly. They argue, they debate, they shout at each other on television. The BBC sometimes calls it political theater, and for once, they are telling the truth. But when the curtain falls, they all shake hands backstage, because the real story is not what happens in the Commons or the Swedish Riksdag. The real story is what happens behind closed doors, in ministries and agencies that never change, in media networks that set the limits of what can even be discussed. And here is the genius of the play. It convinces ordinary people that they are in control. It gives them the toy steering wheel in the backseat of the car. Woohoo! The voters spin it left and right and feeling important, while the car speeds on toward the same destination. This is why patriots so often feel despair after elections. You put your hope in the ballot box, and the box gives you the same poison wrapped in a different package. And then you wonder, was it my fault? Did I not campaign hard enough? Did people not listen? No, it was not your fault, because the game is rigged. It was designed to make sure you lose. Take your own British case, Nigel Farage, a man with undeniable talent and energy and charisma. He spent decades building UKIP and then Reform. He managed to get Britain out of the EU, and yet, where is Britain now? Still drowning in mass immigration. Still ruled by the same globalist ideology. Because while Farage was allowed to bark at the system, he was never allowed to bite it. He was tolerated only as long as it did not fundamentally threaten the core of the liberal order. In Sweden, we see the same story with the Sweden Democrats. Once a radical nationalist party, they now sit in parliament supporting a center-right government. And what has happened? They have been domesticated. Their leaders spend more time apologizing for their past than preparing for the future. They vote for budgets that fund the very multicultural society they once opposed. They are allowed to live, but only because they have agreed to become house-trained pets to the establishment. And if you refuse to be domesticated, well, then you end up like Golden Dawn in Greece. Whatever you think of their style, their program, their mistakes, the fact is undeniable. They were growing too strong, too independent. And so the state crushed them, outlawed them, imprisoned their leaders, not because they had less democratic legitimacy than anyone else, but because they threatened the foundations of the stage play itself. This is the iron law of liberal democracy. Opposition that plays by the rules will be tamed. Opposition that refuses will be banned. In either case, the system wins. You see, your rulers are not afraid of elections. They are not afraid of Nigel Farage or Richard Tice or whoever comes next. They know how to handle that. They have decades of experience of turning rebels into responsible statesmen, into part of the show. What they truly fear is something else entirely. A people that refuses to believe in the theater. A people that stops waiting for a savior on the ballot paper and starts building power outside of their script. That is why when true patriots like Mark Collett cross borders to speak, he is blocked. That is why when nationalists build communities, they are smeared, harassed, and surveilled. Because those are the things that cannot be so easily domesticated or banned. So let us be clear. We cannot vote our way out of this. Elections may have tactical uses. They may provide platforms. They may even buy us some time, but they will not deliver us victory. The play is written to ensure that. And that brings us to the harder, more uncomfortable truth. A truth that you are all aware of, but no mainstream politician dares to say out loud. And something that we must confront if we are to have any future. The reality of demographic change. The numbers are clear. White Britons will become a minority in your own homeland. This is not some distant prophecy, it's happening now. Entire cities have already tipped. London, Birmingham, Leicester, places where the English are no longer the obvious majority, where the culture of the street no longer reflects the people who built the country. The demographic transformation is real, it is rapid, and it is relentless. And yet, here is the part that is often missed. You will become a minority, but you will not vanish. You will not be erased overnight. For decades to come, you will remain the largest group in Britain. You will be a minority, but you will be the biggest minority. That means you will still number in the tens of millions. That means you still hold enormous potential power. if you learn to think and act differently. So what does it mean to be the largest minority in your own country? It means you can no longer think like the default, the taken for granted majority that assumes the state will always reflect your interests. That is gone. The state no longer sees itself as the defender of the English or the British people. In fact, it sees you as an obstacle, even a problem to be managed. Meanwhile, other groups do not rely on the state. They never expected the state to protect them. They rely on themselves. Look around you. Pakistanis in Britain, Somalis in Sweden, Turks in Germany. They organize as clans, extended families, networks. They use loyalty, marriage, money, and religion to build parallel systems of power. They protect their own. They promote their own. They advance their own interests. And let me be clear, I am not praising them, but I am saying we must learn from them. Because while the native populations of Europe cling to the idea that the government will sort it out, these groups already know the truth. They never trusted the government. They trust each other, and that makes them powerful. So the hard truth is this: you must learn to think like a minority in your own land. You must accept that the state will not protect you, that elections will not save you, that the police will not side with you. And then you must ask, how do we survive? How do we grow? How do we thrive under these conditions? It begins with organization, not just political parties, but communities. Not just conferences, but neighborhoods, networks, families. It begins with loyalty to your kin, to your friends, to those who share your values and your struggle. It begins with the courage to say, if others can build parallel societies inside our borders, then so can we. But here is the crucial difference. We are Europeans. We cannot simply copy the clan system of the Middle East. That is not who we are. Our way must be our own. It must be rooted in our culture, our traditions, our history. We build not just on blood ties, but on shared values, trust, and voluntary bonds. Where they may rely on the mosque or the extended family, we can rely on associations, communities, churches, cultural institutions. We can take what works and translate it into something that fits our people. And this is not theoretical. We already see it happening. In Sweden, we built the fria Sverige, the free Sweden, to be exactly such a structure. A place where Swedes can gather, support each other, preserve their identity, and prepare for the future. It is one example, but it proves the point. It can be done. If we refuse to adapt, if we continue to think like a majority when we are no longer one, then we will lose everything. But if we accept reality and act accordingly, then even as a minority, we can remain strong, influential, and capable of shaping the future. And perhaps more than that, the reality of becoming a minority can sharpen us, discipline us, remind us of what truly matters. It can strip away illusions and force us to rediscover the bonds that once made our nations great. Because let us not forget, our ancestors built civilizations under far harsher conditions than these. They faced invaders, famines, plagues, and still they endured. If they could, then so can we. The choice before you is stark. Either remain passive, waiting for the state that betrayed you to somehow save you, or become active, building the networks and communities that will carry your people through the storm. That is the hard truth. Painful, yes, but liberating too, because once you accept it, you stop waiting for somebody else to fix it. You stop expecting the stage play to deliver justice. You realize the future is in your own hands and always has been. And that brings us to the practical question. How do we build the power outside the system? How do we organize in a way that cannot be easily silenced or destroyed? You might look at election and say, oh, if they are theater, if the state no longer serves you, if the demographic tide cannot be voted away, what then? Do we despair? Do we give up? No, that is exactly what they want. We must instead change our perspective. Stop asking how we can take over the existing system. Start asking how we can build something new, something parallel, something of our own. And this is the idea behind my English language podcast, Beyond Collapse, because let's be honest, the state, as you knew it, is collapsing. Not tomorrow, not in a dramatic Hollywood way, but slowly, steadily, piece by piece. You see it every day. Roads full of potholes, hospital understaffed, police stretched thin, schools failing. The government still collects your taxes, still makes grand promises, still find money for foreign wars and endless aid. But when it comes to protecting your community, your children, your traditions, suddenly there's nothing left. When a system begins to collapse, the question is, who steps into the vacuum? And the answer is always the same: those who are organized. That is why in Sweden we created the Free Sweden. We did not sit around and waiting for permission. We started with buying a house. We called it Svenskarnas hus, the house of the Swedes. A place that belongs to us, not to the state. A place where our people can meet, celebrate our culture, build friendships, educate our children, and organize for the future. And we didn't stop there. We bought another house. We moved closer to one another and began to rebuild something that had been lost in modern society: real community. Families began to cooperate. Men started businesses together, and we became a positive presence in the local area. We repaired, restored, and contributed. Instead of withdrawing from society, we showed what can be achieved when people with shared values take responsibility. We are building infrastructure, social, cultural, and economic, from the ground up, not waiting for the state to act, but proving that free Europeans can still build, still organize, still create something beautiful amid the ruins of a collapsing order. And it works. I can tell you from experience, when people enter that house, they feel something they haven't felt in a long time. They feel normal. They feel home. Surrounded by their own people, their own symbols, their own history. That feeling is powerful. It reminds them that they are not alone, that they are part of something bigger. And that is what I mean by building outside the system. You don't have to wait until you have a majority in parliament. You don't have to wait until you have the king's crown or the prime minister's chair. You can start today in your town, with your friends, with your family. You can create schools, associations, cultural events, economic networks. Small things at first, but each one a brick in a fortress of community. And here's the beauty of it. The system has no easy answer to this. They know how to control parties. They know how to censor speeches. They know how to demonize candidates. But what can they do about a group of families running their own sports club, their own summer camp, their own cultural festival? What can they do about neighbors who support each other with jobs, childcare, security? This is how real power is built, quietly, steadily, beneath the radar. While the politicians argue on TV about policies that will never matter, we build something that actually does. And make no mistake, when the crisis deepens, and it will, people will look for alternatives. When the government cannot keep the lights on, when the police cannot keep the streets safe, when the schools cannot teach, then people will ask, who can? And if we have built the structures, the networks, the communities, then we will be the answer. Now, some may say, but isn't that just survival? Isn't that just retreating? No, it's preparation. It is strategy. Because history shows that when empires fall, when states collapse, it is not the loudest voices in parliament that shape the future. It is those who are organized on the ground, those who can provide what the crumbling state no longer can. Think of the monasteries in the so-called Dark Ages. When Rome fell, it was the monasteries that preserved learning, culture, faith. They did not need to rule an empire. They simply endured. And because they endured, they laid the foundation for the Europe that would rise again centuries later. And this is what we must do. Become the new monasteries, the new communities, the new tribes of Europe. Not waiting passively, but actively preparing, actively building. So that when the collapse comes, and it is already here in many ways, we are not victims, but survivors, not beggars, but builders. And this is what the concept of beyond collapse means. Stop thinking in terms of temporary political wins. Start thinking in terms of long-term survival and rebirth. Build what cannot be voted away. Build what cannot be cancelled. Build what cannot be destroyed by one hostile law or another media smear. Before I close, there's one more danger we must talk about, and this danger does not come from the state or from immigration or from global elites. It comes from ourselves. And I'm speaking about what I think you in English call purity spiraling. You have seen it, perhaps you have even felt it or engaged in it. The temptation to draw the circle even smaller, to say, yes, I agree with you on this, but you are wrong on that. Therefore, you are not a real nationalist. You are not one of us. If we go down that road, we will end up like three men in a garden shed, each convinced he is the last true believer. That is not a movement. That is a hobby. And hobbies do not change history. The truth is, we do not need to agree on everything. We do not need to like everyone. What we need is loyalty to our people, our land, our cause. That is the line. That is the foundation. Think of it this way. If your house is on fire, do you stop to argue with your neighbor about whether you prefer cats or dogs, or whether you should vote reform or boycott elections? No, you pick up a bucket and you put out the fire together because survival comes first. Our enemies understand this far better than we do. The establishment, they unite liberals, socialists, conservatives, businessmen, journalists, academics. They disagree on many things, but they agree on the one thing that matters, that our people must not be allowed to take their own side. On that point, they are united, and so they win. And we must learn from that. If you share our basic values, that the English people, the British people, the European peoples have a right to exist, a right to identity, a right to a future, then you are welcome. This is the roof under which we gather, and the roof must be high. The hallway to the door must be long. We cannot afford to throw people out for minor disagreements or different styles. So let me finish with this. We began by speaking about Mark Collett being denied entry to Sweden. A simple act, but one that reveals so much. The state that cannot stop foreign criminals somehow finds the courage to stop an Englishman with a microphone. This is anarcho-tyranny in practice, but here is the deeper truth. It also shows their fear. Because if we were irrelevant, if our ideas were doomed, they would not bother. They would let us speak, laugh at us, and move on. But they know that words are powerful. They know that ideas can spread faster than their lies. And they know that one man who dares to speak for his people can inspire thousands of others to do the same. That is why they try to silence us. That is why they try to domesticate us. That is why they build a stage play of elections to keep us distracted, but the mask is slipping. More and more people see through it. And once you have seen the strings on the puppet, you can never again believe in the show. The hard truth remains. The demographic transformation is real, and you will become a minority in your own land. I will not pretend otherwise. But remember also this truth. You will be the largest minority. You are still millions upon millions. You are not powerless unless you choose to be. The system wants you atomized, isolated, cynical. It wants you sitting alone in front of a television, shouting at the news, but never speaking to your neighbor. It wants you trapped in purity spirals, too busy fighting each other to resist the real enemy. But we are here today because we refuse that script. We are here because we still believe in the strength of our people, the courage of our ancestors, the possibility of renewal. We are here because we know that while they have the institutions, we have the truth. While they have the stage play, we have reality. I have told you about our project, The Free Sweden. It is one example among many of what can be done. A house, a network, a community, small, perhaps, compared to the state, but strong because it is rooted in loyalty, not in bureaucracy. And in that loyalty lies the seed of the future. Imagine thousands of such seeds planted across Britain, across Europe. Communities that live as if they were already free. Families that raise children with pride, not shame. Networks that support each other in work, in culture, in defense. That is something no government can cancel. That is something no election can erase. They can ban a man from crossing a border, and they can close down a website, and they can smear you in the media, but they cannot stop a people who have chosen to endure. They cannot extinguish a flame carried from father to son, from mother to daughter, across generation. And this is where hope lies. Not in waiting for permission, not in begging for recognition, but in living as if you were already sovereign. Every time you organize, every time you support a brother or sister, every time you celebrate your heritage, you take back a piece of the future. The liberal empire is crumbling. You can see the cracks everywhere, in their failed schools, in their broken communities, in their collapsing trust. When it falls, and it will, the question is not where the collapse comes, but who will be standing when it does. If we are disorganized, if we are divided, if we waste our strength on purity spirals, then we will vanish like dust. But if we are organized, loyal, disciplined, then we will endure. And more than endure, we will rise. So my final words to you are simple. Stop waiting. Stop hoping that one more election will save you. Stop expecting the state to suddenly remember its duty. Instead, build. Build communities, build networks, build families. Live as free men and women now, not someday in the future. Because in your hearts, you are already free. And when the day comes that this rotten order falls, it will not be the politicians or the journalists who shape what is coming next. It will be those who are ready. It will be those who stood firm, who built quietly, who refused to bend. So be among them. Be the builders, the loyalists, the torchbearers. Carry the flame, because no matter how dark the night becomes, it is our duty and our destiny to bring the dawn. Thank you.